There is a kind of curse that does not come from an enemy. It does not arrive as a weapon, or a hex spoken by something that hates you, or a poison slipped into the water. It comes from inside. It is written into the deepest part of what you are, present from the first breath, inseparable from the gifts that make you magnificent. You cannot cut it out, because cutting it out would mean cutting out yourself. You cannot outrun it, because it runs in your blood. You cannot defeat it, because to defeat it you would have to stop being what you are. And what you are is the only thing standing between the things you love and the dark. This is the curse of the Blood Angels. They are among the most beautiful of all the Adeptus Astartes. This is not a figure of speech. The gene seed of their Primarch carries something that shapes its sons toward a particular kind of perfection, noble features, a bearing that ordinary humans describe in the language of angels because no other language reaches it, a quality of presence that makes them seem less like soldiers and more like something out of the old religions that the Imperium pretends it has moved beyond. They are artists as well as warriors. They build, they paint, they carve. They create beauty in a galaxy that has very little of it left. And then they go to war with a fury that makes the galaxy's worst horrors hesitate. And inside every one of them, beneath the beauty and the artistry and the nobility, there is a thing waiting. It has two names, because it wears two faces. The first is the red thirst, a hunger for blood that rises in the heat of battle, that whispers that the killing is not enough, that the only thing that will satisfy is to drink. The second is the black rage, a madness that descends without warning, that takes a warrior's mind and replaces it with a memory that is not his own. The memory of a death that happened 10,000 years ago, relived as though it were happening now, until the warrior is no longer himself but a screaming echo of a murdered god. Both come from the same source. Both are inheritance. Both are the price of being a son of Sanguinius. The Blood Angels have spent 10,000 years fighting this. Not the enemies of the Imperium, though they fight those too with a skill and a courage that few chapters can match. The enemy inside. The curse that they carry in their own cells. That takes the best of them one at a time. That turns the gift of their Primarch into the instrument of their damnation. They have searched for a cure across 10 millennia. They have prayed, experimented, bled, and died in the search. They have not found it. They will not find it. This is the thing that gives their story its specific weight. The thing that separates the Blood Angels from every triumphant tale the Imperium tells about its heroes. The curse cannot be cured, because the curse is not a disease that attached itself to them from outside. The curse is them. It is the death of their father, written into the blood he gave them, carried forward through every generation, inescapable as the shape of their own faces. To understand the curse, you have to understand the Father. And to understand the Father, you have to go back to the beginning, to a radioactive wasteland of a world, to a child who fell from the sky, to a being so beloved and so doomed that the galaxy has never entirely recovered from the loss of him. His name was Sanguinius. He was the most beautiful thing the Emperor ever made, and the manner of his death would poison his sons forever. Baal is a dead world, and its moons are deader still. It sits in a system that nuclear war ruined so long ago that the war itself has passed out of memory, leaving only its consequences. A landscape of red deserts and radioactive wastes, of ruins worn down to formless mounds, of a sky that burns with the wrong colors because the atmosphere never fully recovered from whatever was done to it in the age of strife or before. Baal itself is the most hospitable body in the system, which tells you everything about how hospitable the system is. Its two moons, Baal Primus and Baal Secundus, are worse, harsher, more poisoned, more lethal to the things that try to live on them. Things do try to live there. That is the remarkable fact of Baal, the thing that makes it more than just another ruined world among the millions the galaxy contains. Humanity survived on Baal and its moons after a fashion in the long dark after the old civilization died. They survived as tribes scattered across the wastes, scraping existence out of a landscape that offered almost nothing. They survived as mutants, their bodies twisted by the radiation that saturated everything. Generation after generation of deformity accepted as the ordinary condition of life, because no one alive remembered a time when bodies came out any other way. It is hard to overstate how brutal an existence this was. The moons of Baal are not worlds that permit comfort or ease or anything resembling the ordinary business of human life. Water is poison more often than not. Food is whatever the wasteland grudgingly yields, and the wasteland yields little. The radiation that twists the body also shortens the life, so that the people of Baal's moons lived fast and died young, their generations turning over quickly in the constant pressure of an environment that was actively trying to kill them. They warred over the few oases of relative safety, over the scraps of usable land, over the technological relics of the dead civilization that still held value in a world that could no longer produce such things. It was a Darwinian crucible of the harshest kind, and it bred a people of extraordinary toughness. Survivors descended from survivors, hardened by a world that killed everyone who could not endure it. This is the stock from which the Blood Angels still recruit. The harshness was not incidental to what the chapter would become. It was foundational. A world this cruel produces exactly the kind of human material that the transformation into a space marine requires. Bodies and wills already tempered by an existence at the edge of death, already accustomed to enduring what would break softer people. The mutants of Baal were not, despite their hardship, the wrong material for an angel's legion. They were, because of their hardship, precisely the right material. And into this one night fell a child. He came down on Baal Secundus, one of the two moons, in the way that all the Primarchs came down, scattered across the galaxy by the powers that feared what the Emperor was building. Deposited on a world that had no framework for what he was, but where most of the Primarchs landed among people who were at least recognizably whole. Sanguinius landed among the mutants, among the twisted survivors of a poisoned moon, whose bodies the radiation had bent into shapes that the rest of the human species would have recoiled from. The child was not like them. The child was perfect, beautiful in a way that the people who found him had no reference for, his body untouched by the deformities that marked every one of them, except that the child was not entirely unmarked, because growing from his back, as he grew, were wings. Great feathered wings of the kind that humanity had put into its oldest stories about beings that came down from the heavens to walk among mortals. To the mutants of Baal Secundus, a beautiful winged child who had fallen from the sky was not a biological curiosity. It was the confirmation of something they had hoped for without daring to believe. The tribe that found him took him in, They named him. They raised him, this impossible, perfect child, and they watched him grow at the speed that Primarchs grow, faster and stronger and more capable than any of them, into something that their old stories had a word for. An angel. Sanguinius grew up among the mutants, and he did not despise them. This is one of the first things that the histories record about him, and it matters more than it might seem, because it establishes the quality that would define him for the rest of his life. He could have looked at the twisted people who raised him and seen only their deformity. He could have understood himself as something separate, something higher, something that had been placed among lesser creatures by mistake. He did not. He looked at the mutants who had taken in a strange child and given him a home. And he saw his people. He loved them. He defended them. And Baal gave him plenty to defend them against. The moons were a battleground. The scattered tribes in constant conflict over the few resources the wasteland offered. Raiders and monsters and the horrors that a radioactive wasteland breeds, preying on anyone too weak to resist. Sanguinius became the resistance. He grew into his strength, and he turned it to the protection of the tribe that had raised him, and then to the protection of others, uniting the tribes of Baal Secundus through a combination of his impossible capability and the genuine devotion he inspired in everyone who followed him. What is worth noticing about this? What would matter enormously for everything that came after is how he united them. Sanguinius did not conquer the tribes of Baal the way a warlord conquers, through terror and domination and the crushing of all resistance. He united them the way a leader unites, through inspiration, through the example of his own nobility, through making the people who followed him want to be better than they had been. He brought the warring tribes together not by making them fear him, but by making them believe in something, in the possibility that the cruelty of their world was not the only way to live, that strength could be turned to protection rather than predation, that even on a poisoned moon at the edge of a dead system, human beings could choose to be more than the wasteland had made them. This was the seed of everything the Blood Angels would become, the nobility that defines them, the cultivation of beauty against a brutal universe, the impulse to protect rather than merely to dominate. All of it traces back to the young angel on Baal Secundus, who looked at a world of mutants and raiders and chose to make of it something better. Sanguinius did not just survive Baal. He redeemed a corner of it, briefly through the force of who he was. And the people who followed him caught something of that. The way people always catch something from a leader worth following. There was a creature, in the stories, a great beast of the wastes, a monster that had terrorized the tribes for generations. Sanguinius killed it. He fought it alone, and he killed it, and in some versions of the story the fight cost him, marked him, gave him the first taste of what it would mean to be the thing that stands between his people and the dark. The details vary in the telling. What does not vary is the shape of it. The angel who fought the monster to protect the people who could not protect themselves. It is the same shape that his whole life would take. It is the same shape that he would pass to his sons. When the emperor came to Baal, he found a Primarch who had already become what the best of the Primarchs became. A leader beloved by his people. A warrior without equal in his domain. A being who had taken the hand the galaxy had dealt him and made of it something noble. The reunion of Sanguinius with his father is recorded as one of the gladder ones, free of the suspicion and the resentment and the violence that marked some of the others. Sanguinius knew the emperor for what he was. The Emperor knew Sanguinius for what he had made. And what he had made was extraordinary. Of all the Primarchs, Sanguinius may have been the most universally beloved, not the most powerful, though he was among the most powerful, not the most brilliant, though he was far from stupid, but the most loved, the one whose presence made other people want to be better than they were. His brothers loved him. Horus, who would become the War Master and then the great betrayer, counted Sanguinius among his closest friends. The Emperor cherished him. The legion that carried his gene seed, the IX Legion, took the name that suited him and them. The Blood Angels. They went out into the galaxy together, the angel and his sons, and for 2 centuries they were one of the brightest things in the Great Crusade. But Sanguinius carried a secret. Even then, in the bright years before the heresy, before the fall, there was already something wrong in the blood. Something that the angel had noticed, and feared, and hidden. He had begun to see it in his sons, and he could not let the Emperor find out. The first cases were rare enough to be mistaken for something else. A warrior in the heat of battle who went too far, who kept killing after the killing was done, who had to be pulled back, who came out of the red haze of combat unable fully to account for what had taken hold of him. In an army of post-human warriors built for war, this is not immediately alarming. Soldiers lose themselves in battle. The line between necessary ferocity and something darker is not always clear in the moment. And a legion that prized aggression and close assault as the Blood Angels did could absorb a certain amount of excess without asking hard questions about where it came from. But Sanguinius asked. He was watching his sons more closely than the Emperor watched his Primarchs, with the close attention of a father who has noticed something he hopes he is wrong about. And what he saw as the Great Crusade went on was that the cases were not random. They were not simply the ordinary excesses of warriors in the grip of combat. They were a pattern, a particular hunger that rose in his sons when the blood was flowing. A thirst, literally, for the blood of the enemy. A desire to drink that had nothing to do with tactics or necessity and everything to do with something written into what they were. The Red Thirst. Though it did not yet have that name, Sanguinius understood with the dread of a being whose intelligence would not let him look away from an unwelcome truth, what the pattern meant. The thirst was not a behavior his sons had learned. It was not a discipline problem that better training could solve. It was in the gene seed. It was in the biological inheritance that made them his sons, which meant it came from him, which meant that every warrior the Legion produced and would ever produce carried the same seed of the same hunger. It was not a flaw in some of them. It was a flaw in all of them, expressed in some and latent in the rest, waiting, and Sanguinius hid it. This decision is one of the most consequential and most human things the angel ever did, and it deserves to be understood rather than simply judged. He hid the flaw because he was afraid. Not for himself. Sanguinius was not a being who feared for himself. He was afraid for his sons because he had seen what the Emperor was willing to do to a legion that proved defective. The rumors moved among the Primarchs, never confirmed and never quite denied, that 2 of their number, 2 whole legions, had been erased, expunged from every record, their names struck out, their warriors dispersed or destroyed, for reasons that no one would speak of. The 2nd and the 11th, gone as though they had never existed, by an authority that could only have been the Emperor's own. Sanguinius looked at the flaw in his son's blood, and he calculated what would happen if the Emperor learned of it. A legion whose warriors were biologically driven toward bloodlust, whose gene seed carried a hunger that could not be trained out because it was structural. Would the Emperor judge that a legion worth keeping? Or would he judge it a danger, a defect, a thing to be erased before it could become a problem the way the 2nd and the 11th had become problems? The angel would not take that risk. He hid the red thirst. He worked quietly and constantly to manage it, to keep the worst cases from outside observation, to develop the practices and the disciplines that could hold the hunger in check, to find, if he could, a cure. He confided the secret to almost no one. He carried it himself, the way he carried everything, with a grace that concealed the weight of it. He did confide in one person, one of his brothers, the brother he trusted most, the brother whose friendship was among the warmest things in his life, the brother whose judgment he valued, and whose discretion he believed he could rely on absolutely. He told Horus. It is one of the bitterest ironies in a story full of them. Sanguinius, carrying the secret that could destroy his legion, chose to share the burden with the one brother who would later become the enemy of everything they both served. He told Horus about the flaw in the blood, the hunger that rose in his sons, the fear that drove him to conceal it. He told Horus because he trusted him, and Horus took the secret and held it, and said nothing, and filed it away. And years later, when Horus had become something other than the brother Sanguinius had trusted, he would remember the secret. He would remember exactly where the blood angels were vulnerable. He would build a trap precisely calibrated to the flaw that Sanguinius had confided to him in friendship. A trap designed to take the hunger in the blood and inflame it past all control, to turn the blood angels into the very monsters their Primarch had spent his life trying to prevent them from becoming. But that betrayal was still in the future. In the bright years of the Crusade, the secret stayed a secret, and the blood angels remained one of the most celebrated legions in the Emperor's service. And Sanguinius walked through the galaxy as the beloved angel whose nobility concealed a private dread. He was managing it. He believed he could keep managing it. He believed, perhaps, that he had time to find a cure before the flaw became something he could no longer contain. He was wrong about the time. The thing in the blood was patient, but it was not idle. And the galaxy was about to provide it with exactly the conditions it needed to wake up fully, to stop being a manageable secret and become the defining curse of an entire bloodline. The galaxy was about to burn, and in the burning the red thirst would be born in full. When the heresy came, it did not come to the blood angels as betrayal. It came as a mission. The galaxy was already burning by then, though the blood angels did not yet grasp the full scale of it. Horus had turned. The fires of Istvan had been lit. The careful machinery of the Great Crusade was coming apart as legion after legion declared for the War Master or against him, and the loyalist forces scrambled to understand a treachery so vast that the understanding itself came slowly, in pieces, each piece worse than the last. The blood angels received their orders through the proper channels, or what seemed like the proper channel. A message reached Sanguinius. The worlds of the Cygnus cluster had gone dark. Communication lost. A hostile Xenos species the Nephilim thought destroyed in the Great Crusade had apparently returned and overwhelmed the system. The blood angels were to go to Cygnus, cleanse it and restore it to the Imperium. The order carried the weight of legitimate command. Sanguinius had no reason, yet, to doubt its source. The full shape of Horus's betrayal had not yet become clear to him, and the idea that his beloved brother would deliberately send him into a trap was not yet thinkable. So the angel gathered his legion, nearly the entire strength of the blood angels, and set course for the Cygnus cluster to do what the blood angels did, which was to arrive where the Imperium needed them and break whatever needed breaking. It was a trap. It had always been a trap. There were no Nephilim. The Cygnus cluster had not been overwhelmed by Xenos. It had been given over to chaos, transformed into a daemon-haunted hell under the rule of the powers of the warp, prepared specifically and deliberately as a killing ground for the IX Legion. Horus had built it. Horus, who knew the secret that Sanguinius had confided to him in friendship, had designed a trap that aimed not merely to destroy the blood angels, but to corrupt them, to take the flaw in their blood and weaponize it, to deliver an entire legion of the Emperor's finest warriors into the service of the blood god. The blood angels arrived in the Cygnus system and the trap closed around them. The system was wrong in the way that only a place fully given over to chaos is wrong. The stars burned with colors that stars do not burn. The warp pressed against reality until reality gave way, until the boundary between the physical and the immaterial dissolved and the things that live in the immaterial came pouring through. The Blood Angels' fleet was assailed before it reached the inner system. The warriors who made planetfall on Cygnus Prime descended into a nightmare that had been prepared for them with patience and malice. A world of daemons, of horrors, of the calculated torments that the powers of chaos designed to break the minds of those who face them. The Blood Angels did not break easily. They were among the finest warriors the galaxy had ever produced, and they fought through the horror with the discipline and the courage that defined them, cutting their way across a daemon world toward the heart of the corruption. But the trap was not designed to be defeated by courage. The trap was designed to use their courage against them, to push them and keep pushing until the fury that their fighting required tipped over into something else. The daemons targeted the flaw. They had been told where it was. Every torment they inflicted, every brother they killed in front of his kin, every atrocity staged for maximum effect was calculated to inflame the hunger that Sanguinius had spent his life trying to suppress. The Blood Angels fought and bled and watched their brothers die, and the red haze that the angel had feared began to rise in them, not in ones and twos now, not as isolated cases that could be managed and concealed, but across the whole legion, a tide of bloodlust rising in every son of Sanguinius at once. And at the center of the trap, waiting for the angel, was a creature that had been chosen for the task with care. Its name was Kabanda, a bloodthirster, a greater daemon of Khorne, one of the most powerful servants of the blood god, a being of immense physical power and ancient malevolence. It had been placed at the heart of Cygnus to do one thing, to break Sanguinius, to kill the angel, or worse than kill him in a manner that would shatter the Legion's spirit and complete their fall into the service of chaos. Sanguinius went to meet it. Of course he did. He was the angel, and the thing at the center of the horror was the thing he had to face. And he had never in his life sent his sons to face a danger that he would not face himself. What happened when the angel met the bloodthirster would mark the Blood Angels forever. Kabanda was not interested in a fair fight. The blood god's servants are not subtle, but they are not stupid either. And this one understood that the way to break Sanguinius was not simply to defeat him in single combat. It was to hurt him through his sons. The bloodthirster met the angel in the air over Cygnus Prime, two beings of impossible power clashing above a world that had become a wound in reality. And Sanguinius, for all his grace and all his strength, found himself facing something that matched him. An ancient daemon of war, fed on 10,000 years of slaughter, wielding power drawn directly from the god of blood and skulls. They fought, and the fighting was terrible, and for a time it was not clear that the angel would prevail. Then Kabanda did the thing it had come to do. It reached out with its power, and it struck not at Sanguinius but at his sons. And in a single moment, it killed hundreds of them. The accounts speak of the bloodthirster's whip, of a sweep of demonic force that tore through the ranks of the blood angels and left hundreds dead in an instant. Their lives extinguished in front of their Primarch as a deliberate act of cruelty. 500 of the angel's sons, dead in a heartbeat, killed not to win the battle but to wound the father through the children. It worked. The grief and the rage of it struck Sanguinius like a physical blow, and in the same moment Kabanda's whip caught the angel's legs and shattered them, and Sanguinius fell. The most beautiful of the Emperor's sons, the angel who had never been defeated, crashed broken to the surface of a daemon world while his sons died around him. And something broke in the blood angels that would never fully heal. The sight of their Primarch falling, the death of so many brothers at once, the accumulated horror of the daemon world, and the rising hunger that the trap had been inflaming for the entire campaign. It all came together in a single catastrophic moment, and the red thirst erupted. Not as isolated cases, not as a manageable secret, as a tide that took the entire legion at once, drowning reason, drowning discipline, drowning everything that made them more than predators. The blood angels lost themselves, the careful warriors who had been cutting their way across Cygnus with skill and courage became something feral, a red hurricane of bloodlust that fell upon everything in its path, daemon and cultist and, in their madness, their own allies. This was the moment the trap had been built for. This was the fall that Horus had designed. The corruption of an entire legion through the flaw their Primarch had confided to him in friendship. The blood angels, consumed by the thirst, drinking the blood of the slain, lost to the madness. This was meant to be the end of them as servants of the Emperor, and the beginning of them as servants of Khorne. It did not happen. It did not happen because not all of them fell. A small number of the blood angels, some of the Legion's librarians among them, warriors whose psychic discipline gave them a defense the others lacked, managed to resist the thirst. They held on to themselves while their brothers drowned, and they understood that the only thing that could end the madness was the angel himself. That if Sanguinius could be roused, his presence might pull the Legion back from the edge it had gone over. They reached their fallen Primarch. They used means that the Imperium had forbidden, psychic methods prescribed by the Council of Nicaea, the edict that had restricted the use of psychic power across the legions, because the alternative was the loss of everything. And they woke him. Sanguinius rose. His legs were broken, his body wounded, his sons lost in a red hurricane around him. And he did not pause to mourn it. The angel reached out, not to stop the thirst but to direct it, to turn the fury of his sons toward the enemy that had provoked it. His presence, his will, the sheer fact of him alive and moving and fighting gave the berserking legion something to follow. He gave them Kabanda. And Sanguinius, broken-legged and bleeding, went back to face the bloodthirster a second time. The daemon had not expected this. It had broken the angel, killed his sons, driven his legion into damnation. It had done everything required to win. And here was Sanguinius, who should have been finished, coming back for it with a fury that was cold and controlled and entirely his own. Not the mindless thirst that had taken his sons, but the focused rage of a being who had been pushed past every limit and had chosen, instead of breaking, to fight. This is the moment that defines Sanguinius more than almost any other, and it is worth dwelling on, because it is the moment his sons would inherit without ever fully understanding that they had. The angel had every reason to fall. His legs were shattered. Hundreds of his children were dead. His legion had been driven into a madness that he had spent his life trying to prevent. The trap had worked. The daemon had won, and the only thing left for Sanguinius to do was die with whatever dignity a broken Primarch could muster. That is what should have happened. That is what the trap had been designed to produce. Instead, the angel rose on ruined legs and went back into the fight. Not because he expected to win, he could not have known he would win, but because the alternative was to surrender, and Sanguinius did not surrender. He took the worst the universe could do to him, the breaking of his body and the slaughter of his sons and the near damnation of everything he was. And he answered it with defiance. He went back for the daemon because the daemon was still there, because his sons still needed him, because the fight was not over until he was dead, and he was not dead yet. He defeated it. The second time the angel prevailed. He wounded Kabanda grievously and banished it back into the warp, breaking the most powerful weapon the trap had deployed against him. The blood angels, still consumed by the thirst, drove through the remaining daemons and cultists in a frenzy that left nothing alive. A red hurricane that swept the surface of Cygnus Prime until there was nothing left to kill. Only then, when the last corrupted soul had been destroyed, did the legion begin to come back to themselves. They returned to their senses, carrying the horror of what they had done in the madness, including the blood of the space wolves who had been attached to their fleet, and the understanding of what had been unleashed in them. They had survived. They had not fallen. The trap had failed. But it had not failed completely, because the red thirst had been born now, not as a secret managed by a careful father, but as a thing that the entire legion had felt, that had taken them all at once, that they now knew lived in every one of them and could rise again. Cygnus had not created the flaw. The flaw had always been there, but Cygnus had woken it fully, had shown the blood angels exactly what they carried, had turned a hidden fear into a known and permanent curse. And worse was coming. Because the red thirst was only the first face of the curse. The second face had not yet been born. It would be born on Terra, at the end of everything, in the moment the angel had been dreading his entire life, the moment he had already seen. Sanguinius could see the future. Not clearly, not completely, but in fragments, the curse and the gift of a Primarch whose psychic nature ran toward prophecy. He had glimpsed things across his life that he could not unsee, possible futures that flickered at the edge of his perception, and among them was one that he returned to with a dread that never left him. He had seen his own death. He had seen it at the hands of Horus. He had seen the end of the war arriving aboard the War Master's flagship in a confrontation that he would not survive. The angel who could face any enemy without fear carried, through the entire war, the knowledge that the war would end with his death, and that the brother who had been his closest friend would be the one to kill him. Most beings, given that knowledge, would have done anything to avoid the future they had seen. Sanguinius did the opposite. He understood, with the clarity that his prophetic nature gave him, that his death was not a tragedy to be avoided but a necessity to be accepted, that the shape of the war required it, that when the moment came, his death would serve a purpose, would buy something, would matter in a way that his survival could not. So he flew toward it. After Cygnus, after the trap that had nearly damned his legion, the Blood Angels turned toward Terra, toward the throne world, toward the Emperor, toward the final confrontation that everyone could feel approaching. The galaxy was tearing itself apart as the traitor legions converged on Terra and the Loyalists raced to defend it. And the Blood Angels drove through that chaos with a determination sharpened by everything Cygnus had shown them about what Horus had become. They had seen the face of chaos now. They knew what they were fighting. And their angel knew how it would end for him. The road to Terra was not clear. The galaxy in the final years of the heresy was a maze of warp storms and warring fleets. And the journey of the Loyalist legions toward the throne world was a war in itself. Sanguinius and the Blood Angels fought their way home, and along the way the angel did something that revealed the depth of his character under the shadow of his own foreseen death. There was a period during the long, disorienting passage through a galaxy gone mad, when the Loyalist Primarch Sanguinius and Robut Guilliman and the Lion, cut off from Terra and unsure whether the Emperor still lived, attempted to build something. A second Imperium, a refuge of order in the chaos, centered on Guilliman's homeworld of Macragge. Imperium Secundus, they called it, and in that desperate experiment the question arose of who should rule it, who should sit at the head of a reborn Imperium if the original was lost. They chose Sanguinius, not Guilliman, whose world it was and whose genius for governance was unmatched. Not the Lion, with his pride and his strength. Sanguinius. They chose the angel to be emperor. Because of all of them, he was the one the others could agree to follow. The one whose nobility made him the natural center. The one in whom even his proud and difficult brothers could see something worth serving. It was the highest honor the Primarchs could offer one of their own, and they offered it to Sanguinius, and he accepted it as a duty rather than a prize. It did not last. Imperium Secundus was a desperate measure born of the belief that Terra might already be lost. And when it became clear that the Emperor still lived and still held the throne world, the experiment was set aside. But it tells you something about how the angel was seen by those who knew him best, given the chance to choose an emperor from among themselves. The Primarchs chose Sanguinius. They saw in him what the Emperor had seen, what the mutants of Baal had seen, what everyone who encountered him saw. A being who deserved to be followed. And that being was flying, knowingly, toward his own death. He reached Terra before the worst of the siege. The Blood Angels arrived at the throne world and took their place among its defenders, and Sanguinius stood once more in the presence of his father, the Emperor, in what both of them must have understood was the last gathering of its kind. The bright years were over. The Great Crusade was a memory. The dream of a galaxy reclaimed for humanity had collapsed into the nightmare of humanity's finest warriors tearing each other apart. And now it all came down to a single world, a single fortress, a single siege that would decide whether the Imperium survived or fell. Sanguinius knew his part in what was coming. He had seen it. And when the moment arrived, when the choice came between fleeing the death he had foreseen and walking into it, the angel did not hesitate. But before that moment, there was the siege. And the siege was the worst thing the galaxy had ever seen. The Siege of Terror was the largest battle in the history of the human species, and the Blood Angels stood at the heart of it. Horus brought everything to Terra. 7 years of gathered strength, half the legions of the Adeptus Astartes turned traitor. The corrupted might of a galaxy's worth of war machines, and the demonic powers of the warp unleashed without restraint. The traitor host descended on the throne world in numbers that defied comprehension, and the defenders, the loyal legions, the imperial army, the custodes, the mechanicum, every force the Emperor could gather behind the walls that Rogel Dawn had built, braced to hold the heart of the Imperium against the storm. The Blood Angels were among the most important of those defenders. Sanguinius and his sons took their place in the defense of the Imperial Palace, and they fought with everything they were. The skill, the courage, the controlled fury that made them one of the deadliest legions in existence. The angel was everywhere the fighting was worst, his winged form rising over the battle lines, his presence rallying the defenders wherever the traitor assault threatened to break through. He was magnificent in those final days. Magnificent in the way that something is magnificent when it knows it is ending, and refuses to be anything less than its full self in the ending. And he carried the secret of his foreseen death through all of it. He fought knowing how it would end. He inspired the defenders, held the lines, met the worst the traitors could send, and underneath it all was the knowledge that the war's end was coming for him personally, that the flagship hanging in orbit held the brother who would kill him, that the prophecy he had carried his whole life was about to come true. The siege ground on. The outer defenses fell, as Dawn had known they would, bought with the lives of the defenders to buy time. The fighting moved inward, through the breaches, into the palace itself, room by room and rampart by rampart, the defenders falling back from one line to the next, as the traitor advance pressed toward the inner sanctum where the Emperor worked at the labor that might yet save them all. And then came the moment, at the Eternity Gate. The Eternity Gate was the final threshold, the entrance to the Sanctum Imperialis itself, the last barrier before the heart of the palace and the Emperor within it. If it fell, the way to the Emperor was open. It could not be allowed to fall. And it was here, at the most critical point of the entire siege, that Sanguinius made his stand. The traitors threw everything at the Eternity Gate. Among the horrors that came against it was a thing the angel had faced before. Ka'Bandha, the bloodthirster of Cygnus, the daemon that had broken his legs and slaughtered his sons and nearly damned his legion. It had not forgotten. It had come to Terra for the rematch, for the chance to finish what Cygnus had started, and it led the assault on the gate that Sanguinius was holding. The angel did not flinch. Before the battle at the gate, Sanguinius told the defenders with him that any who wished to leave could go, that he would not hold it against them, that the stand they were about to make was very likely a stand unto death. None left. They stayed with the angel, and the angel took to the air, And what followed was one of the great feats of the entire siege. He met Kabanda a third time, and this time, the ending was different. Sanguinius seized the bloodthirster by wrist and ankle, lifted the ancient daemon high above the battle, and broke its back over his knee with a crack that silenced everything for a moment. He swung the broken body around and hurled it into the traitor host. And Kabanda's spirit went howling back into the warp, banished, its form shattered, the army that had followed it into the assault breaking apart in despair. The defenders held, the angel held. The way to the Emperor stayed closed, but the cost of holding it was mounting, and the angel could feel the prophecy closing in. Because above the palace in orbit, the War Master's flagship still hung. The vengeful spirit, the seat of Horus's power, the place where the angel had foreseen his death. And Sanguinius knew that the siege would not end on the walls or at the gates. It would end up there aboard that ship in the confrontation he had been dreading and accepting his entire life. Then Horus did something that no one had expected. Something that changed the entire shape of the siege's ending. He lowered the shields of his flagship. Why Horus lowered the shields of the vengeful spirit is a question the Imperium has never fully answered. The act made no tactical sense. The flagship's void shields were what kept it safe. Lowering them invited the teleport assault that the Emperor's forces had been unable to attempt while they were raised. By dropping them, Horus opened the door to his own destruction. He invited the Emperor aboard. Some say it was arrogance, the confidence of a being who had grown so powerful, so swollen with the gifts of the Chaos Gods, that he believed nothing could defeat him, and wanted the final confrontation to come, wanted to face the Emperor directly and prove himself the master of mankind. Some say it was something else, that somewhere beneath the corruption, beneath the swollen monster the War Master had become, a fragment of Horus Lupercal still survived. The son who had loved his father, the brother who had been the best of them, and that this fragment lowered the shields because it wanted to be stopped, because it could no longer bear what it had become, and the only one who could end it was the Emperor, and lowering the shields was the closest thing to a plea for release that the thing Horus had become could still make. We do not know. The histories preserve the act and not the reason, and perhaps the reason was never knowable, perhaps it was both things at once, arrogance and despair tangled together in a being who was no longer entirely anything. What we know is what happened next. The shields came down, and the way to the War Master opened, and the defenders understood that the moment had come. The Emperor would go aboard the vengeful spirit to face Horus directly, the confrontation that the entire war had been building toward, the father against the fallen son, the only duel that could end it. And Sanguinius went first. The accounts of exactly how this happened vary, but the shape of it is consistent, and it is devastating. The angel, knowing what he had foreseen, knowing that the flagship was the place of his death, went up to the vengeful spirit ahead of the Emperor. Perhaps he teleported with a strike force. Perhaps he went nearly alone. What matters is that Sanguinius reached Horus first, that the angel stood before the War Master in the heart of the corrupted ship, the brother he had loved, the brother who had betrayed everything, the brother he had seen in his visions as the agent of his death. And Sanguinius had a choice. He could see what Horus had become, the scale of the corruption, the power the Chaos Gods had poured into their champion, the near certainty that facing him meant death. The angel could have waited for the Emperor. He could have held back, preserved himself, let his father face Horus as the prophecy had perhaps always intended. He did not. Sanguinius attacked. He attacked because the alternative was to let Horus stand unopposed until the Emperor arrived, and because the angel had never in his life stood back from a fight that needed fighting, and because some part of him perhaps still hoped, against the prophecy, against the evidence of his own visions, that he might reach the brother buried inside the monster. That Horus might still be saved, that the love between them might still mean something. The fight between Sanguinius and Horus was the duel of two of the mightiest beings the galaxy had ever produced, and for a time the angel held his own against the swollen power of the War Master. There is a moment in some accounts where Sanguinius struck a blow that might have ended it, where the angel's fury and skill brought him to the edge of victory, and where he hesitated, or where Horus revealed the depth of the power the Chaos Gods had given him, and the moment passed. And then Horus killed him. The War Master, wielding power beyond anything a Primarch should possess, broke the angel and destroyed him. Sanguinius died aboard the vengeful spirit, exactly as he had foreseen, at the hands of the brother who had been his closest friend. The most beautiful of the Emperor's sons, the beloved angel, the being whom the other Primarchs had chosen to be their emperor, dead, on the deck of a corrupted flagship, killed by Horus Lupercal. But the angel's death was not meaningless. It was never going to be meaningless. Sanguinius had known that, had accepted his death precisely because he understood it would serve a purpose. In fighting Horus, in forcing the War Master to expend himself against a Primarch's full fury, in striking blows that wounded even the chaos-swollen champion, Sanguinius weakened Horus. He cracked the armor. He created the opening. And there is more. In the moment of his death, in the psychic catastrophe of a Primarch's soul being destroyed, Sanguinius left something behind. An imprint. A wound in the warp, in the place where the bond between a Primarch and his sons lived. The death scream of the angel echoing through the blood of every blood angel who would ever live. The angel was dead. His sacrifice had bought the Emperor the opening that would end the war, and in dying he had created the second face of the curse. The Emperor came aboard moments later and found his most beloved son dead on the deck. What the Emperor felt in that moment is not recorded, because there was no one to record it, and the Emperor was not in the business of describing his own grief. But the angel's body lay before him, broken by Horus, and the War Master stood over it, swollen with the power of the dark gods, the best of the Emperor's sons reduced to a monster gloating over the corpse of the brother he had murdered. The duel between the Emperor and Horus is told elsewhere in its full horror. It is the Emperor's story and Horus's, the climax of the entire heresy. But its shape matters here, because Sanguinius had made it possible. The angel had wounded Horus, had weakened him, had cracked the invulnerability that the Chaos Gods had granted their champion. When the Emperor faced the War Master, he faced an enemy that Sanguinius had already hurt. It was still nearly the end of everything. The Emperor and Horus fought, and Horus was mighty enough that even the Master of Mankind struggled against him, and the Emperor, the histories suggest, held back, hesitated, unwilling even now to destroy the son he had loved most, the son he had elevated above all others. And that hesitation cost him. Horus wounded the Emperor grievously, broke his body, brought him to the edge of death. And then came the moment that ended it. The moment when Horus, in his cruelty, killed a single loyal defender, a mortal man or a custodian. The accounts differ across the tellings. Who had thrown himself before the fallen emperor in a final hopeless act of defiance. In destroying that one small act of loyalty, Horus revealed the totality of his corruption. The emperor saw, finally and completely, that there was nothing left of his son to save. That the brother Sanguinius had hoped to reach was gone. That mercy was no longer possible, because there was no longer anyone there to receive it. And the emperor unleashed his full power and destroyed Horus utterly, not merely killing his body, but annihilating his soul, erasing him so completely that not even the Chaos Gods could reclaim him. The War Master, the favored son, the great betrayer was unmade. The cost was the emperor himself. Broken by the duel, his body destroyed, he was carried from the vengeful spirit and placed upon the golden throne where he remains, neither living nor dead. Sustaining the Imperium through means that the heresy had been meant to prevent, a corpse god kept alive by daily sacrifice, silent for 10,000 years. The heresy was over. The traitors, leaderless with Horus destroyed, broke and fled. Terror had held. The Imperium had survived. But the Blood Angels had felt something happen in the moment of Sanguinius's death that they did not yet fully understand. When the angel died, when a Primarch's soul was destroyed in the psychic maelstrom of the siege, the bond between Sanguinius and his sons did not simply break. It recoiled. The death of the father echoed back through the gene seed, through the blood that every blood angel carried, through the psychic link that made them his sons. And it left a wound, a memory of dying that was now written into the inheritance of the entire bloodline. The Black Rage was born. It would not be understood for some time. In the immediate aftermath of the heresy, the Blood Angels grieved their Primarch the way the whole Imperium grieved, as a catastrophic loss, the death of the brightest of them, a wound to the soul of the new Imperium that was being built from the wreckage of the old. They did not yet know that the grief was not only emotional, that it was biological, that something had been planted in their blood that would grow across the millennia into the defining curse of their existence. But it revealed itself. In time, Blood Angels began to fall to something new, not the red thirst, the hunger for blood that Cygnus had woken, but something stranger and more terrible. Warriors who, in the heat of battle, suddenly were no longer themselves, who believed with total conviction that they were Sanguinius, who relived the angels' final battle as though it were happening to them. The fury, the grief, the death at the hands of Horus, screaming their father's defiance, fighting an enemy 10,000 years dead, lost completely to a memory that was not their own and that they could not escape. The death visions of Sanguinius. The first death relived endlessly by sons who had never known him, carried in the blood he had given them, triggered without warning and impossible to cure. This was the angel's final, terrible gift. In dying to save the Imperium, Sanguinius had passed his death to his sons, not as metaphor, not as inherited grief, but as a literal psychic imprint that would take them, one by one, across 10,000 years, and make them relive the worst moment of his existence until it killed them. The Blood Angels had survived the heresy. They had not survived the curse. The curse was only beginning. When the siege ended, the Blood Angels had to find their father's body. The vengeful spirit had been a charnel house, the place where Sanguinius died, where the Emperor was broken, where Horus was unmade. In the aftermath, with the traitors fleeing and the loyalists reeling from a victory that felt almost indistinguishable from defeat, the Blood Angels searched the corrupted flagship for the remains of their Primarch. And they found him. They recovered the body of Sanguinius from the place of his death, and they bore it away with a grief that the histories struggle to convey. The angel was dead, the most beloved of the Primarchs, the being the others had chosen to be their emperor, the brightest of all the emperor's sons, dead. His body broken, recovered from the deck where his brother had killed him. The Blood Angels carried him home, and the manner in which they honored him reveals, again, the depth of their devotion. They did not simply bury Sanguinius, or commit his body to the void as other chapters might have done with a fallen leader. They enshrined him. They built around the memory of the angel a cult of veneration that has only deepened across 10,000 years, treating their Primarch not as a dead commander, but as a martyred saint, a being whose sacrifice had saved the species and whose presence still lived in his sons. The grief of that time was not only for Sanguinius. The whole Imperium was grieving, for the Emperor broken and interred on the golden throne, neither living nor dead, for the dream of the Great Crusade, which had ended in fratricide and ash, for the half of the Space Marine legions that had turned traitor, and the galaxy that had burned in the turning. But the Blood Angels grieved most personally, because they had lost their father in the most intimate way a legion could. Killed by his own brother, his death leaving a wound in their very blood that they did not yet fully understand. And in the years that followed, as the Imperium reorganized itself, the Blood Angels faced the same reckoning every loyalist legion faced. The breaking of the legions into chapters, the reforms of Robut Gilliman, the Codex Astartes that would prevent any single commander from ever again wielding the kind of power that had made the heresy possible. The Blood Angels accepted the reforms, as the loyal legions did, and from the great legion that Sanguinius had led emerged the chapter that would carry his name forward. The Blood Angels of the 41st millennium, 1,000 warriors strong, and alongside them the successor chapters founded from the same gene seed. But the Blood Angels carried something into the new arrangement that the other reformed legions did not. They carried the curse, now fully born, the red thirst woken at Cygnus, and the black rage born at Terra, both of them now permanent features of the bloodline. And they carried the memory of how the curse had come to be, the knowledge that their afflictions were not random misfortune but the direct inheritance of their father's death and their father's secret. Every Blood Angel founded in the new chapter, and every Blood Angel for 10,000 years after, would be born into this knowledge, that to take the gene seed of Sanguinius was to take his death along with his blood, that the gifts and the curse were one inheritance, that there was no way to be a son of the angel without carrying the thing that had killed him. This is the point at which the Blood Angels became what they have been ever since, not a legion fighting a war, but a chapter carrying a curse. The heresy was over. The long defense was beginning, and the long defense would not be primarily against the enemies of the Imperium, though there would be enough of those across the coming millennia. The long defense would be against the thing in their own blood, the slow, inexorable working of the curse, the loss of brother after brother to the thirst and the rage, the endless filling of the Tower of the Lost, and the endless marshalling of the Death Company. They began that long defense in grief, and they have never entirely set the grief down. How could they? Their father is dead, and they carry his death, and every brother they lose to the curse is a fresh reminder of the original loss, the angel falling on the vengeful spirit, the death that started all of it. The blood angels are, in a sense, a chapter in perpetual mourning, mourning Sanguinius, mourning the brothers the curse takes, mourning the cure that never comes. The beauty they cultivate and the nobility they maintain are in part the forms their mourning takes. They build beautiful things because their father was beautiful and is gone. They fight nobly because their father was noble and is gone. Everything they are is shaped by the absence at the center of them. The angel-shaped wound in their blood that 10,000 years have not healed. And yet they are not a defeated people. This is the paradox that makes them more than tragic. A chapter defined by loss, by grief, by an incurable curse, and yet one of the most celebrated and effective fighting forces in the entire Imperium. A chapter whose name is spoken with reverence across a galaxy, whose warriors are heroes in the truest sense the grim darkness allows. They have turned their grief into strength. They have made their curse into a weapon. They have taken the worst inheritance any chapter carries and built from it a tradition of nobility and sacrifice and beauty that few chapters can match. The loss did not break them. It made them what they are. To understand what the Black Rage does, you have to understand what it actually is. Because it is not like any other affliction in the galaxy. It is not a disease. Diseases have causes that can be isolated and, in principle, treated. It is not a curse in the supernatural sense, not a hex laid by an enemy, not a demonic possession, not the work of any external power that could be fought or banished. It is not even madness in the ordinary sense. Though it produces madness, the Black Rage is a memory, a particular memory of a single event belonging to one person, and that person has been dead for 10,000 years. When Sanguinius died aboard the vengeful spirit, the psychic shock of a Primarch's destruction imprinted itself on the gene seed of his legion. Every blood angel carries a fragment of his father in his blood. That is simply what gene seed is. The biological inheritance of the Primarch passed down through every warrior derived from him. But the blood angels carry something more than the ordinary inheritance. They carry the death. The final hours of Sanguinius's life, the fury and the grief and the agony of his battle with Horus, are written into their gene seed alongside everything else, a psychic wound that every son of the angel inherits whether he wants to or not. Most of the time it sleeps. A blood angel can live for decades, even centuries. The gene seed of Sanguinius grants its sons unusually long lives, without the imprint ever waking. He fights, he creates, he serves. He carries the ordinary burdens of a space marine's existence. And the death of his father stays buried in his blood, a dormant thing that never stirs. But it can wake, and when it wakes, it takes everything. The trigger is usually battle, the stress of combat, the proximity of death, the psychic conditions that battle creates. Something reaches into the sleeping imprint and wakes it, and in an instant the warrior is no longer himself. The memory floods up and drowns him. He believes completely, with no fragment of doubt, with the total conviction of lived experience, that he is Sanguinius, that he is standing on the vengeful spirit, that Horus is before him and the Emperor is in danger and the fate of the species hangs on this single fight. The 10,000 years between the angel's death and the present moment collapse to nothing. The warrior is the angel, in the angel's final battle, and he fights it with everything the angel had. It would almost be beautiful if it were not a death sentence. A blood angel in the grip of the Black Rage fights with a portion of his Primarch's own power and fury, strength and speed and ferocity beyond even the considerable baseline of a space marine. The echo of Sanguinius himself surging through a son who has become, for a few terrible hours, a vessel for his father's final moments. They are devastating in this state. They throw themselves at the enemy with the angel's own defiance, screaming words that Sanguinius screamed 10,000 years ago, fighting an enemy that only they can see. And then they die. Because the Black Rage does not end. There is no coming back from it. No treatment that restores the warrior to himself. No way to put the memory back to sleep once it has fully woken. The warrior is gone. What remains is the angel's death, playing out in a body that will keep fighting until it is destroyed. The kindest thing, the only thing, is to let that body die in battle, fighting the enemies of the Imperium, so that the death at least serves a purpose. This is the horror that the blood angels live with. Any of them at any time might fall to it. The most disciplined warrior, the most noble captain, the veteran of 1,000 battles, none of them is safe. The imprint is in all of them, sleeping, waiting for the trigger that might never come, or might come tomorrow. A blood angel goes into every battle knowing that this might be the one where the memory wakes, where he stops being himself and becomes a screaming echo of his murdered father, where his brothers look at him and see that he is gone and understand what must now be done. Because the brothers do understand. The blood angels have lived with this for 10,000 years, and they have built around it the only response that the curse permits. Not a cure, because there is no cure, but a way of giving the lost some dignity in their losing. When a blood angel falls to the Black Rage, his brothers do not abandon him, and they do not simply put him down. They gather the fallen together. They mark them, and they send them into battle as a single unit, in a single role, with one terrible purpose. They become the Death Company. The Death Company is the most haunting institution in the entire Adeptus Astartes. When a blood angel falls to the Black Rage, his armor is repainted. The colors of the chapter, the deep red, the gold, are stripped away and replaced with black. The black of mourning, and across that black are painted red crosses and the marks of grief. The crosses signify the wounds of Sanguinius, the blood the angel shed in his final battle. The warrior who wears them is no longer a blood angel in the ordinary sense. He is one of the lost. He is a vessel for his father's death, and the black armor is his funeral shroud, worn while he still lives, because the warrior inside it is already, in every way that matters, gone. The Death Company are gathered before battle from among those who have fallen to the rage. They cannot be reasoned with in any normal sense. They do not know where they are, do not know when they are, believe themselves to be Sanguinius in the angel's final hours. But they can be pointed, they can be aimed. And so the blood angels give them the role that their condition suits. They are sent into the worst of the fighting, the most hopeless assaults, the places where the enemy is thickest and the chance of survival is lowest. They are the tip of the spear, thrown at the targets that would cost too much for sane warriors to take. It is, in the cold tactical sense, an efficient use of warriors who are going to die anyway. But the Blood Angels do not think of it in cold tactical terms, and to understand them you have to understand that. The Death Company is not a disposal mechanism. It is an act of love. The Blood Angels cannot save their fallen brothers. The rage permits no salvation. But they can ensure that the dying means something, that a warrior lost to the curse dies fighting the enemies of the Imperium, in the company of his brothers, his death purchasing some victory rather than wasting away in a cell. They give the lost the only gift the curse allows, a death with purpose, a death in battle, the death that a son of Sanguinius would have chosen, and they do not send them alone. This is the part that reveals the soul of the chapter most completely. The Death Company is led by chaplains, specifically by a particular kind of chaplain, warriors of immense psychic and spiritual discipline who have trained for the singular task of leading the lost. These Death Company chaplains walk among the fallen, into the heart of the Black Rage, and they do something that seems impossible. They reach the warriors who can no longer be reached. Through the force of their own will, through the bonds of brotherhood, through the rituals and the words that the chapter has developed across 10,000 years, they give the lost warriors a direction. They cannot restore them, but they can guide them, point the rage at the enemy, keep the Death Company moving toward the target, ensure that the fury serves the chapter even in the warrior's final hours. It is one of the most dangerous duties in the Imperium. A Death Company chaplain walks willingly into a unit of warriors who are insane with their father's death, whose strength is amplified by the rage, who might turn on anything in their path. He goes among them anyway because someone must. Because the lost deserve to be led by a brother rather than simply unleashed. Because the dignity of the dying matters to the Blood Angels in a way that it matters to almost no one else in the galaxy. There is one warrior who stands above all others in this role. His name is Lematis. He is a Death Company chaplain of extraordinary power, and he carries a distinction that makes him unique among all the sons of Sanguinius. He has fallen to the Black Rage, and he has not been consumed by it. The rage took him as it takes them all, but Lematis, through a will that defies everything the curse should be able to do, holds on to himself even in its grip. He exists in a permanent state of barely controlled rage, perpetually on the edge of being lost, and he uses that condition to lead the Death Company as no fully sane chaplain could. He understands the lost because he is one of them. He walks among them because he is among them. He is held in a stasis between life and the final death, kept for the moments when the chapter needs someone who can lead the Death Company from inside the rage itself. Lematis is the exception that proves the rule. One warrior, in 10,000 years, who can touch the Black Rage and not be entirely consumed. Everyone else who falls to it is lost. The curse permits exactly one partial victory, and it is not really a victory, it is a man held forever on the edge of an abyss, using his own damnation as a tool to give other damned men a better death. This is what the Blood Angels have built around their curse. Not a cure, a liturgy of loss, a way of carrying the unbearable with dignity, of honoring the fallen, of turning the worst thing in their blood into something that at least serves the brothers it cannot save. But not every warrior who falls is sent to the Death Company. Some are taken instead to a place on Baal, a tower that holds the chapter's most carefully kept secret and its deepest grief. They call it the Tower of the Lost. The Black Rage is the dramatic face of the curse, the sudden, total, irreversible loss. But the red thirst is the one the blood angels live with every single day. And in some ways it is the crueler of the two, because it never ends and it never fully sleeps. The red thirst is hunger, a literal, physical, biological hunger for blood that rises in every son of Sanguinius and rises hardest in battle. When a blood angel fights, when the blood of his enemies is flowing, something in him wants to drink it. Not metaphorically, not as a poetic description of bloodlust. The blood angels feel an actual desire to consume the blood of the slain. A thirst that the killing alone does not satisfy. A pull toward an act that their reason tells them is monstrous, and their blood tells them is necessary. The Imperium has a word for beings that hunger for blood, that live unnaturally long, that possess inhuman strength and beauty and an aversion to the things that the old superstitions said such creatures feared. The word is older than the Imperium, older than the age of strife, a word out of humanity's most ancient nightmares. The blood angels do not use it, but everyone who knows their secret thinks it, because the resemblance is impossible to ignore. The sons of Sanguinius are, in every way that the old stories described, vampires, and they know it, and they hate it, and they fight it every day of their immortal lives. The thirst is always there. In the quiet times between battles, it recedes to a manageable background pressure, a thing that disciplined warriors can hold at bay through will and training and the rituals the chapter has developed. But it never disappears. And in battle, when the blood flows and the killing rises, the thirst rises with it, and every blood angel must fight two battles at once. The battle against the enemy in front of him, and the battle against the hunger inside him. The more blood he spills, the more the thirst demands. The harder he fights, the harder it pulls. Victory itself feeds the curse. Most of the time, they win the inner battle. The blood angels are warriors of extraordinary discipline, and they have 10,000 years of practice at holding the thirst in check. They channel it, turn the hunger into ferocity, let it sharpen their assault without letting it take their reason. Ride the edge of it the way a skilled rider controls a dangerous animal. A blood angel who has mastered the thirst is more dangerous for it, the controlled bloodlust feeding a fury that few enemies can withstand. But the control is never guaranteed, and the cost of losing it is terrible. A blood angel who succumbs fully to the thirst loses himself to the hunger, becomes a feral thing that drinks and kills and kills and drinks, that cannot distinguish friend from foe, that has to be stopped by his own brothers before he does something that cannot be undone. And the thirst is connected to the rage. The two flaws reinforce each other. A warrior who indulges the thirst too freely, who lets the hunger take him again and again, brings himself closer to the black rage. The bloodlust wears down the barriers that hold the death memory at bay. The two faces of the curse feed one another, and a blood angel who loses the daily battle against the thirst moves closer to the final battle against the rage. This is why the blood angels develop the rituals around blood that define so much of their culture. The sanguinary priests, the chapter's specialized apothecaries, who maintain the gene seed and tend to the spiritual as well as the physical health of the warriors, preside over ceremonies in which the thirst is acknowledged, channeled, and contained. There is a relic, the Red Grail, said to contain a drop of Sanguinius's own blood, used in the most sacred of these rituals. by drinking from the grail in the prescribed ceremony. The blood angels symbolically and perhaps literally renew their bond with their Primarch and reaffirm their control over the hunger he passed to them. It is a sacrament built around the very thing that damns them, a way of turning the curse into communion. The whole culture of the blood angels is shaped by this daily war against themselves. Their reputation for nobility, for artistry, for a refined and elevated bearing, it is not separate from the curse. It is in part a response to it. The blood angels cultivate beauty and discipline and high culture precisely because they carry a monster in their blood. And the cultivation is a way of asserting every day that they are more than the hunger, that they are the angel's sons and not the angel's curse, that the thing in the blood does not define them, however hard it pulls. It is exhausting in a way that ordinary warfare is not. A space marine of another chapter fights the enemies of the Imperium. A blood angel fights the enemies of the Imperium and himself, every day, forever, knowing that he can never win the inner war permanently, that the best he can hope for is to hold the line one more day, one more battle, one more century, until eventually the thirst or the rage takes him as it has taken every blood angel who came before. They are heroes who are slowly losing to themselves. And they keep fighting anyway. That is the thing about them that deserves to be understood, not the curse itself, but what they do in spite of it. They know they cannot win. They fight on regardless, with a courage that the curse makes deeper rather than shallower. Because a warrior who fights knowing he will eventually fall to his own blood, and fights well anyway, is braver than one who has nothing inside him to fear. Baal remained the blood angel's home through all the long millennia after the heresy, and the relationship between the chapter and their blasted world says a great deal about who they are. They could have chosen otherwise. After the second founding, when the legions were broken into chapters, the blood angels might have established themselves on a gentler world, somewhere that did not require its inhabitants to be born into radiation and deprivation. They did not. They kept Baal and its moons because Baal was where Sanguinius had been raised. Because the harshness of the world produced exactly the kind of recruits the chapter needed. And because the blood angels are a chapter defined by their refusal to abandon things, their fallen, their Primarch's memory, their cursed and beloved home. The recruits still come from the tribes of Baal's moons, as they did in Sanguinius's time. The mutant strains have been managed, and the worst deformities bred out over 10,000 years of the chapter's careful stewardship, but the people of Baal Primus and Baal Secundus remain what they have always been, survivors of a poisoned world, hardened by an existence that kills the weak, carrying in their culture the memory of the angel who came down from the sky and the chapter that he founded. To be chosen by the blood angels is the highest honor a child of Baal can aspire to. The trials are brutal, as they must be. The ones who survive and are chosen are remade into space marines through the gene seed of Sanguinius. And in that remaking they inherit everything. The strength, the beauty, the long life, and the curse. The Blood Angels' fortress monastery on Baal is a place of extraordinary beauty, which is itself a statement. Where other chapters build fortresses that are purely functional, expressions of war and nothing else, the Blood Angels build something closer to a cathedral, a place of art and architecture and accumulated treasure, hung with the works that the chapter's artisan warriors have created across 10,000 years. A monument to the proposition that the sons of Sanguinius are more than the hunger in their blood. The beauty is deliberate. It is the chapter asserting its identity against the curse, surrounding itself with the evidence of what it values, refusing to let the monster define the monastery, and somewhere within it, or near it, is the Tower of the Lost. The tower is where the Blood Angels keep those who fall to the Black Rage but are not sent to the Death Company, or those who fall and survive the battles the Death Company is sent into, returning still lost, still trapped in the Angels' death, with no enemy left to fight. They cannot be cured. They cannot be restored, and they cannot simply be killed, because they are brothers, because they are the chapter's own, because the Blood Angels do not discard their fallen even when the fallen are beyond saving. So they are kept. In the Tower of the Lost, the warriors who have been taken by the Black Rage live out whatever remains of their existence, trapped forever in the final hours of Sanguinius, reliving the death of their father in an endless loop until their bodies finally fail. It is a place of profound sorrow, a tower full of warriors who believe they are the angel, screaming his defiance at an enemy 10,000 years dead, never understanding where they are or what has happened to them. The chapter tends them, honors them, mourns them while they still live, because the men they were are already gone. The tower is the chapter's grief-made architecture. It is the physical expression of everything the curse costs, a building full of the lost, maintained across 10,000 years, a permanent monument to the fact that the Blood Angels cannot save their own. Other chapters do not have a Tower of the Lost. Other chapters do not need one. The Blood Angels need it because the curse keeps producing the lost. Year after year, century after century, an unending stream of warriors taken by their father's death, and the chapter will not abandon them, and so the tower fills and fills and is never empty. To walk through the Blood Angels' world is to walk through this contradiction at every turn. The beauty and the curse, side by side, inseparable. The cathedral fortress full of art, and the tower full of the mad. The noble warriors who create works of breathtaking beauty, and the same warriors fighting the hunger for blood that rises every time they kill. The chapter that is among the most revered in the Imperium, and the chapter that hides a secret that would see lesser chapters declared excommunicate. It is all the same thing. It is all the inheritance of Sanguinius, the gifts and the curse, the beauty and the hunger, the angel and the death of the angel, passed down together through the blood, because they cannot be separated. Commander Dante understands this better than anyone alive. And Dante has carried it longer than anyone alive, too. There is a dimension to the Blood Angels that sets them apart even from their fellow Space Marines. And it grows directly out of the curse. The Blood Angels are, in a sense the Imperium does not quite have language for, a religious order. Every Space Marine chapter venerates its Primarch. This is ordinary. The Primarchs were beings of such magnitude that the warriors descended from them naturally hold them in something close to worship. And the chapters maintain the memory of their gene fathers through ritual and tradition and the careful preservation of relics. But the Blood Angels go further than veneration, and they go further because of how Sanguinius died and what his death left in them. For the Blood Angel, Sanguinius is not only a revered ancestor, he is a living presence in their blood, literally through the gene seed, psychically, through the imprint of his death, spiritually, through a devotion that shades into the genuinely religious. The angel did not simply found their chapter. He is in them every day in the gifts they carry and the curse they fight. And their relationship to him is correspondingly intense. They do not merely remember Sanguinius. They commune with him. They carry him. In the most terrible cases, through the black rage, they become him. This produces a culture saturated with the imagery and the practice of faith. The Blood Angels' rituals have the weight of liturgy. Their relics have the significance of holy objects. The Red Grail above all, the chalice of the angel's blood, treated with a reverence that goes far beyond the respect other chapters show their artifacts. Their fortress monastery is built like a cathedral because it is, in a real sense, a temple. And their elite warriors are not merely soldiers, but something closer to an order of warrior priests, bound to the angel by vows that are as much spiritual as martial. The highest expression of this is the Sanguinary Guard. The Sanguinary Guard are the most honored warriors in the chapter, an elite of the elite, chosen from the very best of the Blood Angels, who serve as the bodyguard and the living embodiment of the angel's legacy. They wear golden armor in deliberate imitation of Sanguinius himself, and they carry wings, jump packs wrought in the shape of the angel's feathered wings, so that when they descend into battle they fall from the sky as their Primarch once did. They are, visually, a recreation of Sanguinius. A company of golden angels with blades and wings, descending into war, deliberately echoing the being whose blood they carry and whose death they may at any moment inherit. To see the Sanguinary Guard in battle is to see the Blood Angels' entire relationship to their Primarch made visible. They are beautiful. In the way the chapter prizes beauty, they are deadly. In the way the angel was deadly. And they are haunted, because every golden warrior in that descending host carries the same curse as every other son of Sanguinius. The same thirst, the same waiting rage. They are the image of the angel and the inheritors of his doom in the same golden armor, and the splendor and the tragedy are inseparable, as they always are with the Blood Angels. The sanguinary priests sit at the center of this religious culture. They are the chapter's apothecaries, yes, the keepers of the gene seed, the warriors trained in the biological arts that every chapter requires. But among the Blood Angels, the role is sacramental as well as medical. The sanguinary priests tend not just the bodies of their brothers, but their souls, and above all their relationship to the curse. They preside over the blood rituals. They watch for the signs of the thirst rising too high and the rage drawing too near. They are the ones who must recognize when a brother has fallen, when the time has come to repaint his armor black, when a warrior must be given to the death company, or the Tower of the Lost. They carry the burden of knowing the curse intimately, of studying it, of standing closest to it, and they carry the weight of being the ones who pronounce a brother lost. It is a strange thing, this fusion of the medical and the holy, and it exists only because of the curse. A chapter without the flaw would have apothecaries who tended wounds and maintained gene seed and little more. The Blood Angels have priests, because the thing in their blood is not merely a medical condition, but a spiritual inheritance, a death that lives in them, a curse that can only be carried through something that looks very much like faith. The sanguinary priests are the keepers of that faith, the tenders of the wound, the watchers at the edge of the abyss that every Blood Angel carries inside. And the faith is not misplaced, exactly, even in a galaxy where the Imperial Creed is mostly a tool of control and the gods men worship are either silent or monstrous. Because Sanguinius was real, he was not a myth or an invention or a useful fiction. He lived, and he was as noble as the legends say. and he died to save the species, and his blood really does live in his sons. The blood angels worship something that was true. Their angel was an angel, near enough, a being of beauty and power and self-sacrifice who gave his life for humanity and left his death in the blood of those who came after. There are worse things to build a faith around. There are few things in the grim darkness of the far future that are as nearly worthy of devotion as the memory of Sanguinius. The way the blood angels fight cannot be separated from the curse, because the curse shapes everything about how they make war. They are assault specialists. Where some chapters favor the patient gunline, the careful application of firepower at range, the blood angels close the distance. They come down from the sky on wings of flame, jump packs that let them leap over the battlefield and land in the heart of the enemy, where the fighting is closest and bloodiest and most personal. They fight with blades and chainswords and the brutal intimacy of close combat, where they can see the faces of the things they kill, where the blood is immediate and the killing is hand to hand. This is not an accident of doctrine. It is the expression of what they are. The blood angels are drawn to close assault by the same thing that curses them, the thirst, the hunger for blood, the pull toward the visceral immediacy of the kill. A blood angel in close combat is a blood angel riding the edge of the thirst, channeling the hunger into ferocity, letting the curse feed his fury, without letting it take his mind. They fight close because something in them wants to fight close, and they have built a war doctrine around mastering that want, rather than denying it. It makes them magnificent in the assault. Few forces in the galaxy can match the blood angels when they descend. The speed of them, the fury, the skill honed over the long lives the angels' gene seed grants. All of it sharpened by the controlled edge of the thirst. They hit like a thunderbolt and they fight like nothing else. And the sight of golden winged warriors falling from the sky has broken the morale of enemies before the first blow lands. But it also puts them constantly in the conditions where the curse is most dangerous. Close combat, surrounded by blood and death and the chaos of the melee, is exactly where the thirst rises hardest and the rage is most likely to wake. The blood angels fight in the precise circumstances that bring them closest to losing themselves. Every assault is a calculated risk, not just the ordinary risk of battle, but the deeper risk that the fighting itself will trigger the thing in their blood, that a warrior will go too far into the red haze and not come back, that the close quarters fury the chapter specialist is in will tip a brother over the edge into the thirst or the rage. They accept this risk because they have no choice. The curse pulls them toward close combat whether they will it or not, and because the same doctrine that endangers them makes them one of the deadliest forces in the Imperium. It is the blood angels' nature in miniature. The thing that makes them magnificent and the thing that damns them are the same thing, and they have learned to wield the danger as a weapon rather than be destroyed by it. The Death Company fits into this doctrine in the grimmest possible way. When warriors fall to the black rage, when the close fighting has woken the angel's death in them, they are not removed from the battle. They are concentrated into the Death Company and aimed at the hardest target on the field. The chapter's assault doctrine has a place built into it for the warriors the assault doctrine destroys. The Death Company are the ultimate expression of the Blood Angels' way of war. Warriors who have given everything, including their minds, thrown at the enemy in a final devastating charge. The curse turned into a weapon at the exact moment it claims them. There is a cold logic to it that the Blood Angels would never describe in cold terms. The curse takes warriors in battle, especially in the close assault the chapter favors, so the chapter has built a doctrine that uses the warriors the curse takes. The fallen become the spear point. The rage becomes a tactic. It is efficient in the way that the Imperium is efficient. Nothing wasted, even the destruction of a brother's mind turned to use. But for the Blood Angels it is not efficiency. It is the only dignity available. If a brother must fall, let his falling mean something. If the curse must take him, let it take him at the front. Fighting, purchasing victory with the wreckage of who he was. This is why the Blood Angels are both revered and quietly feared by the rest of the Imperium. Revered because they are heroes, beautiful, noble, mighty, the defenders of terror in its darkest hour, the bloodline of the most beloved Primarch. Feared because those who know their secret understand what walks beneath the gold and the nobility. A chapter of warriors who hunger for blood, who fall sometimes into a madness that makes them believe they are a dead god, whose finest assault troops include warriors who have lost their minds entirely and been pointed at the enemy like guided weapons. The Inquisition watches the Blood Angels as it watches anything that carries this kind of danger. It watches, and it leaves them mostly alone, because the Blood Angels' loyalty across 10,000 years is beyond question, and their value to the Imperium is beyond calculation. But it watches, because the curse is real, and everyone who knows about it understands that the line between the angels' sons and something monstrous is thinner than anyone would like. The Blood Angels know they are watched. They know what they look like to those who know their secret. And they carry that too, the suspicion, the fear, the knowledge that even their allies see the monster behind the gold. And they remain loyal regardless. Because loyalty and nobility are the answers they have chosen to give to the curse. The assertion they make every day that they are the angels' sons and not the angels' doom. It would be a mistake to think of the Blood Angels only through their curse, because the galaxy does not know them primarily as cursed. The galaxy knows them as heroes. And that reputation was earned across 10,000 years in battles that had nothing to do with the thirst or the rage, and everything to do with the courage and skill that the sons of Sanguinius bring to every war. They have fought everywhere the Imperium has bled. They were at the defense of terror in the heresy, the foundation of their glory, the days when Sanguinius held the Eternity Gate, and the Blood Angels stood at the heart of the largest battle in human history. And in the 10,000 years since, they have added battle after battle to a record that few chapters can rival. They fought on Armageddon in the great wars against the orc invasions that threatened that vital world. The wars in which the hero Tycho fell to the curse. The wars that tested the chapter against a green tide that seemed without end. They have fought the Tyranids across countless worlds. The Blood Angels' assault doctrine well suited to the close, brutal fighting that the Great Devourer forces upon its enemies. They have fought the traitor legions, the ancient enemies from the heresy who still pour out of the eye of terror to make war on the Imperium their treachery nearly destroyed. And for the Blood Angels, every battle against the traitors carries a personal weight, because it was a traitor who killed their father. Because the war against chaos is, for them, the unfinished business of the heresy itself. They have stood against demons, which for the Blood Angels is a confrontation laden with terrible memory. because it was daemons at Cygnus who first woke the red thirst in full. Daemons who broke their father's legs and slaughtered his sons and tried to damn the legion. When the blood angels face the forces of the warp, they face the things that cursed them, and they fight with a fury sharpened by that knowledge. In all these wars, the blood angels have been distinguished by a particular quality. They go where the fighting is worst. They are an assault chapter, the warriors who descend into the heart of the enemy, and across 10,000 years they have again and again been the force thrown at the targets that other chapters could not take, the breach that had to be held, the position that had to be stormed, the hopeless assault that had to be made. The blood angels have a long history of being the ones sent into the impossible, because their doctrine suits it, and their courage allows it, and their curse, in the end, provides them with warriors who can be spent on the targets too costly for anyone else. This is why the Imperium reveres them, not for the curse, which most of the Imperium does not even know about, but for the deeds, the long unbroken record of a chapter that has bled for the Imperium on 1,000 worlds, that has held when holding seemed impossible, that has produced heroes whose names are spoken with awe across the segmentums. The blood angels are, in the Imperium's eyes, among the noblest and most accomplished of all the Adeptus Astartes, the bloodline of the beloved angel, the defenders of terror, the golden warriors who fall from the sky to break the enemies of mankind. And the curse is woven through all of it, invisible to the wider Imperium, but ever present to the blood angels themselves. Every one of those celebrated battles was also a battle against the thirst. Every assault that earned the chapter its glory was also an assault that risked waking the rage. The heroes the Imperium reveres were also warriors fighting the enemy inside their own blood. Every single time. And some of them, like Tycho, lost that inner battle even as they won the outer one. The glory and the curse are the same history, seen from two different sides. The Imperium sees the heroes. The blood angels see the price the heroism cost. There is one more thing the deeds reveal, and it matters for understanding who the blood angels truly are. For all the darkness of their curse, for all the grief and the doom and the slow loss of brother after brother, the blood angels have never once turned from the Imperium. 10,000 years of an incurable curse, 10,000 years of watching their own blood betray them, 10,000 years of a burden that would have broken lesser chapters into bitterness or madness or worse. And the blood angels have remained loyal, noble, and true through all of it. They have had every reason the galaxy can offer to fall, and they have not fallen. The curse takes them one by one, but it has never taken the chapter, never turned the bloodline of Sanguinius against the emperor their father died to save. That, in the end, may be the blood angels' greatest victory over the curse, not the cure they never found, not the brothers they could not save, but the simple, stubborn, 10,000-year fact of their loyalty, the refusal to let the curse make them anything other than the angels' true sons. Horus tried to turn them at Cygnus and failed. The curse has tried to turn them every day for 10,000 years and failed. The blood angels carry the worst inheritance in the Imperium, and they have never once let it make them less than noble. The angel would be proud of them. That perhaps is the only cure that was ever truly available, not the removal of the curse, but the refusal to be defined by it. Commander Dante has led the blood angels for more than 1,000 years. That sentence is easy to read and almost impossible to absorb, because 1,000 years is not a length of time that human beings are built to comprehend. Empires rise and fall in less. The gene seed of Sanguinius grants its sons unusually long lives. But even by the standards of the Blood Angels, Dante is an extreme, the oldest living space marine in the entire Imperium. A warrior who has fought for longer than most human civilizations have existed, who has held the office of chapter master through a span of time that has worn away mountains of lesser men. He has earned every year of it. Dante rose through the chapter the way all Blood Angels rise, through skill and courage and the slow accumulation of deeds. And somewhere along the way he became something more than a chapter master. He became the standard against which the chapter measures itself. He has fought in more battles than any living being can accurately count. He has led the Blood Angels through 10 centuries of the Imperium's endless wars, and he wears, as the symbol of his office, one of the chapter's most sacred relics, the death mask of Sanguinius, a golden mask made in the image of the angel's own face. The mask matters more than an ornament should, because of what it does and what it means. When Dante puts on the golden mask of Sanguinius, his warriors see the face of their Primarch. In the chaos of battle, the sight of the angel's features advancing at the head of the chapter is a thing of enormous power, a reminder of who they are and what they fight for. The angel returned to lead them in the form of the warrior, who has earned the right to wear his face. Dante has worn the mask for so long, and worn it so well, that for many Blood Angels the line between the commander and the Primarch has grown thin. He is not Sanguinius. He would never claim to be. But he is the closest thing the chapter has to the angel's living presence, and he has carried that weight for 1,000 years. And the weight is crushing. This is the thing about Dante that the legend can obscure. He is not a triumphant figure, not a hero who has conquered the curse and risen above it. He is a warrior who has carried the curse longer than anyone, who has watched it take brother after brother across 10 centuries, who has led more men into the death company than any commander in the chapter's history, who has stood in the Tower of the Lost and looked at the faces of warriors he knew and trained and loved, now lost forever to the angel's death. Dante has buried more brothers than most chapters have ever fielded. He has carried the grief of all of it for 1,000 years. He is also tired. The histories that touch on Dante's inner life suggest a being who has lived too long, who has seen too much, who continues out of duty rather than any hope of an ending he would welcome. He has earned rest 1,000 times over and has never been permitted to take it. Because the chapter needs him, because the Imperium needs him, because there is no one else who can carry what he carries. He goes on because going on is what is required. And the requirement never ends. And in the era Indomitus, the age that followed the opening of the Great Rift, when the galaxy was torn in half and the darkness pressed harder than it ever had, Dante's burden grew heavier still. He was named Lord Commander of the Imperium Nihilus, given authority over the defense of the entire dark half of the galaxy, the half cut off from the light of the Astronomicon, the half where the Imperium's situation ranged from desperate to hopeless. The oldest warrior in the Imperium, who had earned rest 1,000 times, was handed responsibility for holding together the part of the galaxy that was hardest to hold. He took it, because that is what he does. He took it the way Sanguinius would have taken it, as a duty, not a prize. The burden accepted because someone had to bear it, and he was the one who could. Dante embodies the Blood Angels' relationship to their curse more completely than any other living warrior. He has not escaped it. He has not cured it. He carries it every day for longer than anyone. And he keeps fighting. And he keeps leading. And he keeps putting on the golden mask of his murdered father and walking into battle at the head of his cursed and beautiful chapter. He is what the Blood Angels are, doomed and noble and unwilling to stop. He has also spent much of his long life on the same search that has consumed the chapter since the heresy, the search for a cure that does not exist. And the man he has charged with that impossible task is the keeper of the Red Grail, the chapter's high priest, a warrior named Corbulo. Corbulo is the sanguinary high priest of the Blood Angels, and he carries two things that no one else in the chapter carries. The first is the Red Grail, the sacred chalice that holds a drop of Sanguinius's own blood, the most precious relic in a chapter full of precious relics. Corbulo is its keeper. He presides over the rituals in which the Blood Angels reaffirm their bond with their Primarch and their mastery over the thirst, and he guards the Grail as the physical link between the living chapter and the dead angel. The second thing he carries is hope, or the closest thing to it that the Blood Angels possess. Corbulo is the warrior Dante has charged with finding a cure for the flaw. It is a task that has defeated 10,000 years of sanguinary priests before him, and Corbulo knows it, and he pursues it anyway, because the alternative is to accept that the curse is permanent, and the Blood Angels are simply doomed. He studies the gene seed. He searches the chapter's records and the galaxy's forgotten places for anything that might point toward a solution. He is said to possess a measure of the angel's own gift of foresight, a fragment of prophecy that makes him valuable beyond his medical knowledge. And he has not found the cure. Because there is no cure, but the search itself is a kind of faith, the refusal to stop looking for a way to save the brothers the curse keeps taking. If Corbulo represents the chapter's hope, then Mephiston represents the single time the curse was beaten, and what beating it actually costs. Mephiston is the chief librarian of the Blood Angels, and his story is the closest thing the chapter has to a victory over the Black Rage. He fell to it, as so many have. The rage took him in battle, and by every rule of the curse he should have been lost, sent to the Death Company, marked for a death that served the chapter, because no other death was possible. He was buried in rubble during a battle, left for dead, trapped and dying with the rage consuming his mind. And he came back, through days of struggle in the dark, alone, at war with the death of his father inside his own skull. Mephiston did what no Blood Angel had done before, and almost none have done since. He conquered the Black Rage. He fought the memory of Sanguinius's death, and he won by sheer psychic willpower, by a strength of mind that defies everything the curse is supposed to be. He emerged from the rubble transformed, no longer the warrior he had been, but something new, something that had walked into the angel's death and walked back out the other side. They call him the Lord of Death now. Mephiston is one of the most powerful psychers in the entire Adeptus Astartes. His abilities elevated to extraordinary heights by whatever happened to him in that struggle against the rage. He is cold in a way that other Blood Angels are not, set apart from his brothers by the thing he survived. More than a little frightening even to his own chapter, because conquering the Black Rage did not make him free, it made him other. He paid for his victory by becoming something that is no longer quite a man, a being who has touched the death of his Primarch and been remade by it, who carries his triumph as a kind of isolation. He beat the curse, and the beating changed him into something his brothers regard with awe and unease in equal measure. He is the exception, and like Lamatus, he proves the rule. The curse can be beaten exactly once by a will strong enough to be almost inhuman, at the cost of becoming something other than what you were. For everyone else, there is no victory. There is only the holding action, the daily war, and eventually the fall. Astorath understands this better than anyone. He is the High Chaplain of the Blood Angels, and his title carries a duty so terrible that the chapter gave it its own name, the Redeemer of the Lost. Astorath travels not just among the Blood Angels, but across all the successor chapters descended from Sanguinius, seeking out the warriors who have fallen to the Black Rage, and his mercy is the executioner's mercy. Where the Rage has taken a warrior and no purpose remains for him in the Death Company, Astorath grants him the Emperor's peace, death delivered by a brother's hand, the release that the curse otherwise denies. He carries a great axe for exactly this purpose. He travels the galaxy, ending the lives of brothers the curse has destroyed. Because someone must. Because the lost deserve a clean death from one who understands what they were. And because Astorath has taken that burden onto himself so that others do not have to. And then there is the cautionary tale. The warrior whose story the Blood Angels tell as a warning about what the curse does even to the great. His name was Tycho. Tycho was a hero of the chapter, a captain, a celebrated warrior, a Blood Angel of pride and skill and accomplishment. And the curse took him by degrees. The thirst worked on him over time, growing harder to control, until in the war for Armageddon against the Orcs it began to consume him. Tycho felt himself slipping, felt the hunger taking him, and understood what was coming. And when the Black Rage finally claimed him, he did not go quietly into the Tower of the Lost. He went into the Death Company, and he died in battle, fighting to the end, a hero unmade by the thing in his blood, a captain reduced to one of the lost. His story preserved by the chapter as a reminder that no one is safe. Not the celebrated, not the strong, not the proud. The curse takes whom it takes, and even the heroes fall. It is worth returning for a moment to the choice that began all of it, because the curse the Blood Angels carry is not only Sanguinius's death, it is also Sanguinius's secret. And the secret was a choice. And the choice has a weight that the chapter has carried alongside everything else. Sanguinius hid the flaw when he first saw the red thirst rising in his sons during the Great Crusade. He understood what it meant, and he concealed it, because he feared the Emperor would destroy the Legion if the truth were known. This was a father protecting his children. It was also in the long view that only hindsight provides, the decision that made the trap at Cygnus possible, because the secret had to be shared with someone, and the someone was Horus, and Horus used it. There is a version of this story in which Sanguinius's concealment is a tragic error, the mistake that armed his brother against him. But that version is too simple, and it does the angel a disservice. Consider what the alternative was. If Sanguinius had revealed the flaw, the most likely outcome, by his own estimation, informed by the fate of the lost legions, was the destruction of the Blood Angels, not the curing of the flaw, because the flaw could not be cured. The erasure of the legion that carried it. Sanguinius did not conceal the curse to gain an advantage or to deceive for his own benefit. He concealed it because revealing it meant the death of his sons, and concealing it meant their survival, and he chose their survival even though concealing it meant carrying a terrible secret alone. The fact that Horus later weaponized the secret does not make Sanguinius' choice wrong. It makes it tragic. The angel did the loving thing, the protective thing, the thing a good father does, and the galaxy, through the treachery of the brother he trusted, turned his love into a weapon against the very sons he had been trying to protect. That is not a failure of judgment. It is the particular cruelty of the universe the blood angels inhabit, where even the right choice, the loving choice, becomes an instrument of harm in the hands of chaos. And Sanguinius carried more than the secret. He carried the foreknowledge of his own death, and he carried it for years, and he went to Terra anyway. This is the part of the angel's story that most deserves to be sat with, because it is the part that the blood angels inherit most directly in spirit, even though they cannot inherit it in fact. Sanguinius knew he would die. He knew Horus would kill him. He had seen it again and again, in the prophetic visions that were part of his nature. And he did not flee it, did not try to evade it, did not spend his final years searching for a way to escape the future he had seen. He accepted it. He understood that his death would serve a purpose, that it would weaken Horus, create the opening the Emperor needed by the survival of the species, and he walked toward it with his eyes open. This is the deepest root of the Blood Angels' character, deeper even than the curse. Their Primarch was a being who faced certain doom with grace, who carried an unbearable knowledge without being broken by it, who chose to do the necessary thing even though the necessary thing was his own death. And his sons, who carry his blood and his death and his secret, also carry, whether they know it consciously or not, his example. They face their own certain doom, the curse that will eventually take each of them with the same grace. They carry their own unbearable knowledge, that any battle might be the one where the rage wakes, without being broken by it. They do the necessary thing, again and again, even when the necessary thing costs them everything. The blood angels are their father's sons in this most of all, not in the wings, though some of them have wings, not in the beauty, though they are beautiful, not even in the curse, though the curse is his most literal bequest. They are his sons in the way they carry doom, knowingly, gracefully, without flinching, doing what must be done because it must be done, remaining noble in the face of an ending they cannot escape. Sanguinius died well, knowing he would die, because his death had meaning. His sons live well, knowing they will fall, because their lives have meaning. It is the same courage, expressed across 10,000 years, passed down in the blood alongside the curse it answers. The angel gave his sons his death. He also, in the manner of his dying, showed them how to carry it. That is the inheritance, in full. The gifts and the curse and the example of how to bear the curse, the beauty and the hunger and the grace that holds the hunger in check, the death that lives in the blood and the courage to live nobly in spite of it. It all comes from the same source. It all comes from the angel. It cannot be separated, any of it, because it is all the same blood, the most magnificent and the most doomed inheritance in the entire Imperium of man. For 10,000 years, the blood angels have searched for a cure. It is worth understanding what that search has actually meant, because a search that lasts 10,000 years is not a project. It is a way of life. It is a faith. Generation after generation of the chapter's finest minds have devoted themselves to the flaw. Sanguinary priests have spent their long lives studying the gene seed, mapping its structure, searching for the place where the curse lives and the means by which it might be excised. Apothecaries have experimented with every technique the Imperium's biological arts allow. Librarians have probed the psychic dimension of the Black Rage, seeking to understand the imprint of Sanguinius's death and whether it might be eased or removed. The chapter has pursued every avenue, however unlikely, however desperate, across a span of time that beggars comprehension. They have tried medicine. They have tried surgery. They have tried psychic conditioning, hypnotic suppression, the careful management of the gene seed across generations to breed the flaw toward dormancy. They have tried ritual and faith and the sacraments of the Red Grail. In the most desperate and dangerous chapters of their history, some have tried things they should not have. Alchemical experiments, forbidden techniques even in the darkest cases, pacts with the kind of powers that should never be bargained with, the assumption being that a cure worth any price was worth even those. Every attempt has failed. Some have made things worse. None has come close to removing the curse without removing what makes a blood angel a blood angel. The closest anyone came was Mephiston, and Mephiston did not find a cure. He survived the rage through sheer will and was transformed into something other than a man in the surviving. His example cannot be replicated. It cannot be taught or distributed or turned into a treatment. It was a single warrior's singular triumph, paid for with his humanity, and it offers the chapter no path forward except the knowledge that the rage can, in theory, by a will strong enough, be faced and survived. For everyone who is not Mephiston, the rage remains what it has always been: a death sentence. So why do they keep searching? After 10,000 years of failure, after every technique has been tried and every avenue exhausted, after the introduction of Call's improved gene seed proved that even the greatest genetic project in Imperial history could not remove the flaw, why does the search continue? They keep searching, because to stop searching would be to accept that the brothers the curse takes are beyond all hope, and the blood angels will not accept that. The search is not really about the expectation of success. It is about the refusal to abandon. The same impulse that sends them back for their fallen on the battlefield, that builds the Tower of the Lost rather than simply killing the mad, that gives the Death Company a chaplain to lead them rather than just unleashing them. The same impulse drives the endless search for a cure. It is the Blood Angels saying across 10,000 years and 10,000 failures that they will not give up on their own. That as long as a single brother might yet be saved, the search must continue. That hope, even hope without realistic foundation, is preferable to the surrender that would come with admitting the curse has won. There is a nobility in this that is almost unbearable. A chapter that knows at some level that the cure will never be found, and that searches anyway, century after century, because the searching is itself a form of love. Corbulo studies the gene seed not because he truly believes he will succeed where 10,000 years of his predecessors failed, but because someone must keep trying, because the moment the Blood Angels stop trying is the moment they accept the curse as their master, rather than their burden. The search is the chapter's refusal to be mastered. It is defiance dressed as research, faith dressed as medicine. Love dressed as the patient study of a problem that has no solution. And in a way, the failure of the search is the final confirmation of everything the curse means. If a cure existed, if the flaw could be cleanly excised, the thirst and the rage removed while the gifts of the angel were retained, then the curse would be merely a disease, an unfortunate affliction that happened to attach itself to an otherwise blessed bloodline. But there is no such cure, because the curse is not an affliction attached to the bloodline. It is the bloodline. It is woven into the same gene seed that grants the gifts, inseparable from the beauty and the strength and the long life and the bond with the angel. To remove the death of Sanguinius from his sons, you would have to remove Sanguinius from his sons, and then they would no longer be his sons at all. This is why the Lamenter's fate is so instructive and so feared. They are the one bloodline that seemed to lose the curse, and they did not become free blood angels, blessed with the gifts and spared the doom. They became something marked in a different way, hunted by misfortune, ground toward extinction. The universe, it seems, will not permit a son of Sanguinius to carry the angel's blood without also carrying some form of the angel's doom. Lose the thirst and the rage, and you gain a curse of luck instead. The mark cannot be removed. It can only change its shape. So the blood angels carry what they carry, and they search for the cure they will never find. And the searching is part of who they are. 10,000 years of failure has not dimmed it. The era Indomitus, with its darkness and its desperation, has not ended it. Somewhere on Baal or wherever the chapter's fleets carry them, a sanguinary priest is studying the gene seed of the angel, looking for the answer that 10,000 years have not yielded, because that is what the blood angels do. They do not give up on their own. Not their fallen on the battlefield, not their lost in the tower, not the brothers the curse has yet to take. They keep searching, and they keep fighting, and they keep carrying the angel's death with a grace that the angel himself would recognize, because he carried his own death the same way. The curse did not stay confined to the blood angels. When the legions were broken into chapters after the heresy, the gene seed of Sanguinius was used to create successor chapters, new commands founded from the angel's bloodline, sent out into the galaxy to multiply the strength of his inheritance. And they inherited everything: the gifts, the beauty, the long life, and the curse. All of it. Every chapter descended from Sanguinius carries the red thirst and the black rage. Because the flaws are not in the blood angels specifically, they are in the angel's gene seed itself, in the blood that all his sons share. To be descended from Sanguinius is to inherit his death along with his blood. There is no version of his bloodline that escapes it. The successors carry it in different ways, and the differences are revealing. The flesh-tearers carry it worst. They are the successor chapter in whom the curse runs hottest, the thirst hardest to control, the rage closest to the surface. Where the blood angels cultivate beauty and discipline as a bulwark against the hunger, the flesh-tearers have been worn down by it. A chapter perpetually closer to the edge, feared even by their allies for the savagery that the curse drives them to in battle. They are dying, slowly as a chapter. The thirst and the rage take their warriors faster than the blood angels lose theirs, and their numbers have dwindled across the millennia toward a point from which no chapter recovers. Their commander, Gabriel Seth, leads a chapter that knows it is being consumed by its own blood and fights on anyway, with a ferocity sharpened by the knowledge of its own doom. The flesh tearers are what the blood angels might become if discipline ever failed. The curse winning, slowly, across centuries, a noble bloodline ground down into something feral and dwindling. Other successors carry it more quietly. The blood drinkers, the angels sanguine who hide their faces and keep their secrets. The angels in carmine, the angels vermilion. Chapters that descend from the angel and manage the curse as best they can. Each in their own way, each carrying the same inheritance under different colors and different traditions. And then there are the lamenters, whose story is the saddest of all. The lamenters were thought, for a time, to have done the impossible. Among all the successors of Sanguinius, they alone seem to have shed the curse. The red thirst and the black rage apparently absent from their gene seed. The flaws that damned every other son of the angel somehow not present in them. It should have been salvation. It should have been the thing the blood angels had searched 10,000 years to find. Proof that the curse could be escaped, that a bloodline of Sanguinius could exist free of his death. But the galaxy does not give the sons of Sanguinius gifts without taking something in return. The lamenters lost the curse and gained something worse. A catastrophic, almost supernatural ill fortune that has followed them through their entire history. Every time they have tried to prove themselves, disaster has found them. They have been caught on the wrong side of events through no fault of their own, made to suffer for loyalty, nearly annihilated again and again by circumstances that seem almost designed to destroy them. They were caught up in a rebellion they had not chosen and made to do penance for it. They have been thrown into hopeless wars and ground down to almost nothing. A chapter that should have been celebrated as the one that beat the curse has instead been hunted toward extinction by sheer relentless misfortune, until their numbers have fallen so low that their survival hangs by a thread. The lamenters tell the blood angels something they perhaps already knew. There is no escaping the inheritance of the angel. Lose the curse in one form and it returns in another. The bloodline of Sanguinius is marked, and the mark cannot be removed, only changed. The hunger traded for misfortune, the rage traded for ruin. To be a son of the angel is to carry his doom in some form, always, no matter what. This is the thing that makes the curse inescapable in the deepest sense. It is not just that the blood angels cannot cure it. It is that the curse is woven into what they are so completely that even removing it does not free them. The lamenters removed it and were destroyed by their freedom. The angel's death follows his blood wherever it goes, in whatever form it must take, and there is no son of Sanguinius anywhere in the galaxy who has escaped it. There was a moment in the recent history of the galaxy when all of this came to a head, when the curse and the bloodline and the long doom of the angel's sons were tested as they had never been tested since the heresy. It came to Baal itself. It came as one of the largest invasions the blood angels had ever faced, a thing that threatened to end not just the chapter, but the entire bloodline of Sanguinius in a single catastrophe. It was called the Devastation of Baal. The Devastation of Baal was the closest the blood angels ever came to the end. It happened in the era Indomitus, in the terrible years after the Great Rift tore the galaxy open. A tendril of Hive Fleet Leviathan, one of the vast Tyrannid invasions, An ocean of alien organisms driven by a hunger that makes even the red thirst look modest. A swarm that devours entire worlds and leaves nothing behind, set its course for Baal. For the homeworld of the Blood Angels. For the cradle of Sanguinius's bloodline. The Tyranids do not hate. They do not scheme. They simply consume, and they were coming to consume Baal and everything on it, and the scale of the approaching swarm was beyond anything the Blood Angels could face alone. So Dante did something that revealed both the desperation of the moment and the bonds that still held the Angels' bloodline together. He called for help. He summoned the successors, the flesh-tearers, the lamenters, the blood drinkers, the angels of every name descended from Sanguinius. And they came. Chapter after chapter of the angels' sons converged on Baal to make a stand for the world that had birthed them all. It was the largest gathering of Sanguinius's bloodline since the Horus Heresy. And it might have been the last. The siege of Baal was a catastrophe almost beyond description. The Tyranids came in numbers that turned the sky black, that consumed the moons of Baal Primus and Baal Secundus, that ground the defenders down through sheer biomass and relentless assault. The Blood Angels and their successors fought with everything they had, every warrior, every relic, every scrap of strength the bloodline could muster, and still they were losing. The defenders were pushed back from the moons to the homeworld, from the outer defenses to the fortress monastery itself, dying by the hundreds against an enemy that felt no loss and never stopped coming. And here the curse did a strange thing. As the situation grew more hopeless, as the defenders faced what looked like the certain extinction of the entire bloodline, the black rage began to spread through the Blood Angels and their successors on a scale never seen before. The proximity of death, the psychic weight of the siege, the sheer desperation of a last stand for the Angels' home, it woke the death of Sanguinius in warrior after warrior, until whole companies were falling to the rage, the death company swelling to a size that had no precedent in the chapter's history. It should have been the end, a chapter consumed by its own curse at the moment of its greatest need, the rage taking the defenders just when they could least afford to lose them. But in the apocalyptic logic of that battle, the swelling death company became something else, a final, terrible weapon. Warriors lost to the Angels' death, fighting with the Angels' power, thrown against the endless swarm in the chapter's darkest hour. The curse that had taken so much across 10,000 years became, at the very end, part of how the bloodline made its last stand. It was not enough. By itself, it was never going to be enough. The defenders of Baal were being overwhelmed, the bloodline of Sanguinius being consumed world by world and wall by wall, and the end was visibly approaching. And then deliverance came, though deliverance in the grim logic of the 41st millennium is never simple, and what saved Baal carried its own complications and its own cost. The Primaris reinforcements arrived. The new Space Marines, larger and stronger, brought by the returned Primarch Robert Guilliman as part of his great crusade to save the dying Imperium, came to Baal in its darkest hour. And with them came aid enough to break the siege, to turn back the tendril of Leviathan, to save what remained of the defenders, to prevent the extinction of the Angels' bloodline at the last possible moment. Baal survived. The Blood Angels survived. But the devastation had cost them more than any battle since the heresy, and the deliverance came with a question attached. A question about the new warriors who had arrived to save them, and about whether they carried what every son of Sanguinius had always carried, because the Primaris Marines were new. Their gene seed had been refined, improved, worked on for 10,000 years by the mind that created them. And there was a hope, quiet, desperate, barely spoken, that perhaps these new sons of the angel might be free of the thing that had damned every generation before them. The hope did not last. The Primaris Marines were the work of Belisarius Cawl, the ancient archmagos who had spent 10,000 years, on the Emperor's own instruction given before the heresy ended, building a new generation of space marines. He had refined the gene seed of every legion, corrected flaws, improved on the original work, produced warriors that were in many ways superior to the Astartes who had come before. If anyone could have removed the curse from the blood of Sanguinius, it was Cawl, with 10,000 years and the full resources of his genius brought to bear on the gene seed of every Primarch. He did not remove it. Whether he could not, or chose not to, is not entirely clear, and the ambiguity is its own kind of answer. When the Primaris Blood Angels took their place in the chapter, when they fought and bled alongside their firstborn brothers, they proved to carry exactly what the Blood Angels had always carried. The red thirst rose in them as it rose in every son of Sanguinius. The black rage took them as it took the others, the new generation. For all its improvements, for all the 10,000 years of work that had gone into it, inherited the angel's death along with the angel's blood. The curse had survived everything. It had survived the heresy, survived 10,000 years of searching for a cure, survived the greatest genetic project in the history of the Imperium. Cawl could improve the gene seed in 100 ways, and the one thing he could not do, or would not do, was separate the sons of Sanguinius from the death of their father. Because to remove it perhaps would have meant removing something essential. The curse is woven so deeply into what the bloodline is that it may not be possible to take it out without taking out the angel himself, without unmaking the gift in the act of removing the flaw. This is the final confirmation of the thing the whole story has been building toward. The curse cannot be escaped because the curse is not separate from the blessing. The same gene seed that makes the blood angels beautiful and noble and long-lived and mighty is the gene seed that carries the thirst and the rage. The same bond with Sanguinius that gives them their gifts is the bond that transmitted his death. You cannot keep the angel and lose his dying, because they are the same inheritance, the same blood, the same terrible and magnificent legacy. So the blood angels go on into the new age carrying what they have always carried. The galaxy is darker now than it has ever been. The great rift has split it in half, and Dante holds the dark side as Lord Commander of Imperium Nearless, and the wars have grown more desperate and the enemies more numerous and the hope more scarce. And through all of it the blood angels fight as they have always fought, with skill, with courage, with the controlled fury that the thirst feeds, and the discipline that holds the thirst in check. With the knowledge that any of them might fall to the rage in any battle, with the death company at the tip of the spear and the Tower of the Lost filling with the fallen, and the search for a cure continuing without hope of success. They are still beautiful. They still create. The cathedral fortress on Baal still holds the art of 10,000 years, and the new generation adds to it. And the chapter still asserts every day through its culture and its discipline and its nobility that the sons of Sanguinius are more than the hunger in their blood. They still go back for their fallen. They still honor their lost. They still put the golden mask of their murdered father on the oldest of them and follow it into battle. And they still cannot escape what they are. There is something in this that goes beyond the Blood Angels, beyond Warhammer, beyond the lore of a single chapter in a fictional galaxy. The Blood Angels are a story about inheritance, about the things we carry in our blood that we did not choose and cannot put down. About the way a parent's death can shape a child who never knew them. About the impossibility of separating the gift from the wound when both come from the same source. About what it means to be doomed by your own nature and to live nobly anyway. To fight a battle you know you will eventually lose and to fight it well. To carry a curse with dignity, because dignity is the one thing the curse cannot take from you unless you let it. The Blood Angels did not let it. That is the whole of their story in the end. 10,000 years of a curse that takes them one by one, and 10,000 years of refusing to be diminished by it. The hunger rises and they master it. One more day. The rage waits and they fight anyway. The cure never comes and they keep searching. The fallen are lost and they keep going back for them. The angel died on the vengeful spirit 10,000 years ago, and his death lives in the blood of his sons, and it will live there until the last son of Sanguinius falls. They know this. They have always known this. And every morning, on a poisoned world beneath a dying sky, the sons of the angel rise and put on their armor and go to war, carrying their father's death inside them, and they do not break. That is the curse they cannot escape, and that is the courage that makes them worthy of the angel whose blood they carry. The courage to be magnificent in the certain knowledge of their own doom, to hold the line one more day against an enemy that lives inside them, to remain until the very end, the sons of Sanguinius.